Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today I wanted to do your should you buy video on the new RSI Scorpius, which is the new fighter that is very reminiscent of the X-Wing with a bifold wing formation now in Star Citizen. Now, this ship is for sale today for concierge members as a war bond purchase price of $200. So my assumption when this goes to a larger scale tomorrow is going to be about $215 to $225 if you're going to end up using credits. Now, I would normally hold off on making a purchase recommendation and instead just inform you about this ship because typically you have a lot of missing or limited data and you're missing information about components. But since we do have that information on this ship, for the most part, we'll go ahead and cover what we know and then jump into my overall recommendation. Now, don't forget that if you appreciate this content and you want to see more of it on a regular basis, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button to stay in tune. The Scorpius is a two-man craft with a pilot and co-pilot that talks about being a heavy fighter in the brochure. But that doesn't really mean that this is a large fighter. You know, size-wise, we're seeing it being 24 meters long, 33 meters wide, and 13 meters tall, which seems relatively big for a smaller fighter. Now, it's worth calling out, though, that the wings on this are very long, and they angle up and down and a little bit back. So it artificially makes the ship seem bigger than it actually is. The Saber, by comparison, is the same length, but is 26 meters wide and only 5 meters tall. The wings on the Scorpius are also able to fold back and almost make it look kind of like an Aurora, so it can be tucked away and be a little bit more transportable than it would normally be in its flight layout with the wings extended. The components the ship brings along are small, so you can further see the differentiator here between this and some of the larger fighters, but you have a small jump drive, quantum drive, and fuel tank. More importantly, though, you have 2 small coolers, 2 small power plants, and 2 small shields. Now, we're going to do a lot of comparing to the Saber, which also has 2 small power plants as well, but it comes with 3 small shield generators, so it should be significantly more durable than the Scorpius as long as the shields hold up. We don't really know anything about the armor at this point to say how durable the Scorpius is without the shields up, so that'll be a TBD that we have to see later on. Now, the weapons on this ship are where things get very interesting, because in the default configuration, you have 4 size 3 laser repeaters, likely Panthers, on the turret. On the wings, you have 4 size 2 gimbaled laser repeaters, which is likely going to be Badgers. But with them being gimbaled, unless they're bespoke gimbals, which is not unprecedented, you could technically have 4 size 3 weapons on the wings of the ship as well. So you have a grand total of 8 size 3s on that ship. And that firepower feels relatively crazy when you say it basically is double of what the Saber can bring. Now, there's a few factors and considerations when you talk about the balance here, though. First off, we're relatively certain that the only 4 guns that are pilot-controlled are going to be on the wings of the ship. But there is a small outlier, a precedent set by the Super Hornet that can slave the ball turret to the pilot control. Now, that can also be used as a remote turret for a secondary person in the vehicle. Now, ground vehicles also have this ability. So with that in mind, it's way more common for ships to not be able to allow for the pilots to control the guns on the turret, at least until the AI blades come into the game, and that involves computers and other factors. So the turret itself is also on tracks, which means that it can rotate on rails kind of from the dorsal top of the ship and then being able to slide backward and a little bit underslung on the ship. And that gameplay feels more advanced and is not as simple as pilot controlled. So I'm pretty certain as a one-man craft, you're only going to be using those 4 guns on the wings. So if you're flying this solo, the firepower there is really about equal to the Saber. You both have 4 size 3 weapons. Now, if you talk about 2 on 2, 2 Sabers versus 2 in a Scorpius, the effectiveness of multiple ships wins the day again and continues to be a trend that we have to follow. A more interesting comparison would be for a 2-man craft would be in the Hurricane, which has the same turret weapon sizes but has 2 size 4s on the nose versus 4 size 3s. DPS-wise, if you just load them all up with laser repeaters, the Hurricane delivers 3080 DPS, while the Scorpius can bring 3520, or about 15% more DPS. Now, having the size 4s on the nose of the Hurricane will eventually help with things like armor penetration in the future, but for ships that isn't required on, or just frankly current state of the game, the Scorpius outguns the Hurricane as well. Both the Saber and the Hurricane have weapons mounted in much more favorable locations, being near the center line of the ship, and that's beneficial for a few reasons. First off, if you lose a wing in combat in the Scorpius, you lose a gun, and you're immediately down DPS. The other less thought of reason is with convergence. The further your guns are from each other, they're not all going to be able to land shots at close distance or at long range, with you having that really set convergence point where the ship operates at full DPS capacity. So because of that, at many engagement ranges, you may only be operating at 6 size 3s because 2 of them can't actually land shots with the others. It may also be kind of a pit battle. Now, the wings form what I believe to be potentially another problem, which is a view and maybe a fire blocker, meaning that your turret may struggle to shoot laterally because you'd hit your own ship. Now, when you've got that turret on tracks and it's able to slide forward and backward, it may help to limit that to some degree, but until I see it in action, I have some doubts about how effective it's going to be shooting sideways. When I look at the placement of weapons and potential threats, I see the direct sides of this ship being risky to be in the Scorpius with, especially if a light fighter like a Gladius or an Arrow can find a blind spot and be hard to shake from there. I also question a 20 or so degree angle kind of from the below the nose head on, because the top turret's not going to be able to shoot down to hit you. And if it was on the back, it doesn't appear to have any forward firing options, limiting it to what seems to be about 180 degrees up and down. The turret placement does make it a pretty ideal option, though, for doing attack runs. Because what you can do is you can get all of your weapons firing forward on your way in, and then as you're on your way out, you can stay strafing your ground turrets, and the turret can slide to the rear and continue to deal a lot of damage against the target. That's very valuable in space as well, because there's going to be times that you need to turn your tail and run, or just bypass your target and continue on in a direction while they try and catch up. But then you can slide your turret to the back and continue to engage. That's also a value add if you have somebody that's chasing you through an asteroid field. You can be controlling and focusing on flying and evading while you have your gunner continuing to get shots in. So I think once we get into the should you buy part of this video, it really depends on your goals and what you want to get out of it. Looking at the price, it's not a crazy expensive concept in comparison to other ships that we've seen, and with 8 size 3 weapons and 8 size 2 missiles, it came in a little bit cheaper than I was expecting it to see. Now, when you look at the value, what you get in return, I think it's entirely dependent, assuming the turret's not able to be slave to the pilot, on if you want to run with a crew of 2 or not, and if you've got that secondary person to play with you on the regular. Because if not, a Saber brings the same DPS and more shields without convergence issues or wing damage threats, along with a cheaper price tag. Now, comparing to the Hurricane is the better comparison point, right? Because I think eventually you're going to talk about two-man almost gunships, for example. And I think eventually the 2 size 4s will provide more value on the Hurricane, but until armor's really a factor, the turret is basically a direct upgrade on the Scorpius, seeing that it's on rails and has a little bit more firing solution of where it's at. I also think that this is dependent on the wings not being too much of an issue to land shots, but you get the value addition of the better location on the rear of the ship. If you're looking for a good ground convoy buster, or just a general planetary defense ship, or maybe a bunker mission ship, then this may be a really good option, especially if those wings end up giving you the stability and control I expect it to have as a result. The ship doesn't look fast to me, but we'll have to see what happens there. The should you buy here really comes down to the question being, are you looking for a craft that you're going to fly solo most of the time? And if that's the case, this is not the right ship. That being said, if you like a 2-man fighter like a Super Hornet or a Hurricane, then this is a compelling ship that I think fits a little bit of a gap. I also think if you're weighing a ship that you could use in this purpose, and you're looking at this or the Hurricane, I like the weaponry on the Scorpius a little bit better than I like on the Hurricane, just because you've got the 4 weapons with more DPS comparatively. I personally thought that this had too much firepower if 8 size 3s were going to be the option, which ended up being the case. But if I take the price tag out of the equation and look at 2 arrows versus this, which even looking at the price tag, it's $50 cheaper to purchase, they're going to win almost every time. So I think the things are pretty okay with where they stand today because of the personnel investment it takes to be able to do what you're doing and what you're trading off by not bringing an additional ship. Overall, it's a cool ship. It's got a cool design. It's got a new form factor. I love that. I love diversity in the game. We have a few questions that are left to be answered, so if we get that tomorrow or with a Q&A in the near future, I'll be updating the information. Obviously, once I get in and can fly, I'll be covering the ship in a lot more details. But that's really about it. So we're going to be doing our first 3.13.1 giveaway with this video. So please check the comments to see if you're a winner from that prior video. If you're interested in further ones, go back and look a couple videos back. The entry was there. So that's it for this video. If you have questions, get them in the comments. Otherwise, thank you guys for watching. Have yourselves a wonderful day and take care.